again, thank you for joining us at the ever-improving No Soundbites Allowed podcast. My name is Michael Vasquez. We thank you for joining us in this adventure of describing the politics that go on in our nation on a personal and local level as often as possible, giving you, the audience, more than just 30 seconds to understand what's going on in our nation. We look forward to joining you as we go. Just sit back, enjoy the ride. Please remember, if you like the episodes, like it, share it, let other people know, and if you can, please donate, even if it's $2, even if it's $5, because it all makes a difference. We thank you, and here we go. Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. It's always happy to be here with you. This is your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier. And I want to again say, I thank you, each and every one of you, because you make it all worthwhile. You're the reason why I do this every week, to talk about the issues that face our nation that are huge. We're talking about the issues that can't be answered in 30 seconds, or at least shouldn't be answered in 30 seconds or in a soundbite, because there are so much more to them. They're so important to all of us. And we just really haven't heard enough about them. And I'm going to be talking about immigration, the border, and children being separated from their families. This is a big deal. It's been all over the news. And quite honestly, it really hasn't been addressed properly, because we haven't been hearing the full story. We've been misled. And, well, I'm going to get into that. But before I get into that, I do want to go over a little bit of interesting news. Newsflash. Now, I know everybody follows the program, and you may have missed this, though, because it was during the middle of this week. On June 19th, we had the opportunity to have an exclusive interview with County Executive Jason Garnar. He's the County Executive for Broome County, New York, and he came onto the program. He was here in our studio live, speaking with us, answering some of our questions. I think it's a great interview, about half an hour with this elected official, talking about how his decisions have been affecting us and some of the things that we can expect. It was a great interview. We thank the county executive for coming in and speaking with us. In addition, we also want to mention that we have another exclusive interview that can only be found here on No Soundbites Allowed. That's going to be coming up next week. On June 28th, we will be speaking with Assemblyman Clifford Crouch, who represents the 122nd District of New York, and he'll be coming in to have an interview with us. He is up for re-election in 2018. He will be facing the Libertarian candidate Eric Bosworth, who we have already done an exclusive interview with, and also Nick Libis. Now, Mr. Libis is running as a Republican, challenging Assemblyman Crouch for the Republican nomination for the 122nd District. And so that's going to be interesting. And we do have a request in with Nick Libis on being on the program and interviewed, and we are working out the date for that. He will be doing an interview with us along with Assemblyman Clifford Crouch. So we do invite you to check this out. I think you'll find it quite interesting. Now, with all that said, let's get to the real meat and potatoes of this episode. Why we're here. Why we just can't accept 30-second sound bites. Why we can't allow just headlines to be the thing that makes it all, where all of our policy comes from. We're seeing a huge thing happening across this nation. It's the immigration issue. It's about children. And I know that we've all heard or seen something about it. Just today, on June 22nd, about 2 hours ago, I ran across a tweet that was posted onto or reposted onto Facebook by a hippie homemaker. And it goes something like this. I'm pretty sure you've heard of these before, but this one says, quote, "Don't cross the border illegally," end quote. "The only reason you are not in their shoes, seeking asylum, is because you had the sheer dumb luck to be born here. You have done nothing to deserve the privilege you have. You did not earn your citizenship. You were lucky." And that was posted approximately 24 hours ago on Twitter, and then reposted 2 hours ago, June 22nd, on Facebook. And I had a response to that, by the way. And my response is, quote, no matter the luck in place you are born, that does not negate the rule of law. The fact that some were born, which is luck itself in some nations, in a less than perfect country, does not convey a privilege of legal immigration status, nor obligate any nation to defer to the feelings of any populace. It's a very simple statement that I made. And you don't hear this very often. You hear a lot, and we've been seeing a lot of emotional content out there telling you that you must agree with this, that you are evil, that somehow you are a monster or demonic just because there is a law that exists out there. And this law exists since 1997. It's actually called the Flores Settlement, where in 1997, individuals sued the government to be able to have treatment for unaccompanied minors and for those accompanied with their parents to be able to, in terms of their immigration status and how they're going to be detained. And in that 1997 ruling, it was required for the government to provide facilities, separate facilities for minors, children who are unaccompanied and also accompanied. That was then challenged in the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for the United States in 2016. It was actually in June of 2016. And the Ninth Circuit Court came back on July 6th of 2016 and required that the government must move forward. Now, one of the things that was in the argument on the Ninth Circuit Court challenge of the Flores settlement was that not only must minors be treated separately, that they must be both, whether they're accompanied or unaccompanied, that they would have to be put in separate facilities. There was also the question that, well, if they're there with their parents, if they are accompanied, they must be released, both the parents and the child. And the court said that is not the case. And I'm quoting from that ruling itself. It states, applying familiar principles of contract interpretation, we conclude that the settlement, Flores settlement, unambiguously applies both to accompanied and unaccompanied minors, but does not create affirmative release rights for parents. We therefore affirm the district court in part, reverse in part, and demand. This is directly from the 2016 June 6th decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. And again, the important part here is that the Flores settlement applies to both the accompanied and unaccompanied minors, which means that they must be separated into a separate facility while their immigration status is being determined, and that the parents do not get the right to be released just because they have a child. The immigration issue has to be addressed first. That's the rule. That's the law. And a lot of people said there is no law, there is no requirement. That's not true. That's just not true. There is a law from 1997, which was then approved and updated in 2016, affirming what we have to do. Now, 6 weeks ago, President Trump enforced this law, much like we have seen previously by President Obama. Again, that was in 2016, the ruling came down, and he had the influx. We had 100,000, actually over 100,000 unaccompanied minors that came into our nation. They were abandoned by their parents in foreign countries and sent into the United States because of the DACA decision. And we had to deal with that. We had to address those unaccompanied children that were flooding our gates. And so this ruling confirmed the Obama administration policy to separate those children, about 90,000 of those children, and to treat them separately, to separate them from their adults and parents, and to address that issue. As the court ruling just said, and I will have links on all of this so you can look this over for yourself. So we've established very clearly there is in fact law that has to be followed. Absolutely. And 6 weeks ago, President Trump, just like President Obama, enforced that law as it exists, doing what it says, treating the children exactly the same and putting them into separate facilities for their safety as their immigration status is being addressed. These are facts. You may not have heard of them, but they are facts, and we will have those links. Now, given that, 6 weeks ago, we heard zero from the Democratic Party. Nancy Pelosi, Chuck Schumer, Cynthia Nixon, all of them. There were no Democrats that were complaining about this. There were no Democrats that were saying that there was an issue. There was no news media covering this issue. This was not an issue because it was existing law that was being enacted exactly the same as it had been enacted since 2016 by President Obama. Take that, and that's a very important thing. Let's understand that. It is exactly the same. There was no change. No Democrat cared. They did not care. No news media cared. They did not act on this. This is not new. This was ongoing. That's important because from that news, we then go forward. And if you remember, about 2 months ago, we were in the middle of the discussion about whether or not President Trump was going to meet with North Korea. We were in the middle of the discussion about how well our economy was doing. And the Democrats had come out and they had continued to say that because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, that the country was in bad economic shape. They were saying at that time, 6 weeks ago, that the North Korea deal, well, alternately, were saying that we should not speak to North Korea, that we should not cancel a meeting with North Korea, and that if we do meet with North Korea, that it will have no relevance. These are all the things that were happening 6 weeks ago. What then happened? The next thing that happened is we found out that the economy is doing exceptionally well. 3.8% unemployment, lowest black unemployment ever, women's unemployment down. That basically every group and category that the government follows is doing better. The number of self-employed businesses had grown to some of the highest levels we've seen in the nation in almost a decade, and that the economy is doing fantastic. And then in terms of North Korea, we found that North Korea gave back some of our prisoners. They dismantled a nuclear facility. They dismantled a missile facility. We had the meeting with North Korea. They reaffirmed that they're looking to denuclearize and that they wanted to start the process of peace and to finally end the Korean War after 55 years. These are facts. That's the environment we found ourselves in June, roughly the second week of June. Democrats were losing ground. There had just been an announcement, I think I addressed it in last week's podcast, that Democrats are now at almost the lowest level of power they have ever had in 100 years. That they are 10 seats away from having the least amount of power that they've had in 100 years. And they are desperate. They were losing the argument on the economy, losing the argument on safety. They're losing the argument that President Trump is ineffective. Not that he's likable. That's a different question. Not that he is the best friend of anyone. And even the question about trade wars is still up in the air, and they were not winning on any of these subjects. And the news media was not winning on its constant daily push to say that President Trump is evil or ineffective and that he was driving the nation into a worse position. And polls were reflecting that fact. And his approval rating were in the upper 40s, almost 51%, because we have an effective president, not a nice guy, not a friendly president, but an effective president. There is a difference. And with that news, Democrats were looking for almost anything they could find to take on. And we saw them trying to present different issues. And that's when the red flag laws started coming up, which I've been talking a lot about. And we started seeing some of the other issues that have not been addressed for months upon months, gun control and so forth, were not being addressed. Suddenly, there needed to be an issue that the news media and the Democrat leadership could attack that would somehow put the question into whether or not President Trump is effective. And that's when we started to hear about, back on June 13th, we heard from Nancy Pelosi, and she started speaking about the issue of immigration. And in particular, at that point, she started to talk about the minors, children, who were unaccompanied. And we saw news releases at that time talking about the unaccompanied minors. And Nancy Pelosi, after the news media came out and suddenly said, well, children were being put into separate locations. All of a sudden, at that moment, we started to hear about the question of children. Matter of fact, Nancy Pelosi even went so far as to go into saying that there should be uprisings. She called for riots in the streets. Before we go any further, I'm going to take a quick break, and then I'm going to go into step by step how we got to where we are today, because it's important, because the public is being manipulated massively. And you should know about that. Whether or not you agree with it, that's another thing. You should know what's being done to you. And that's why this program's here. So let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back, and we'll talk a little bit more about what's going on.
I ain't had you in weeks. I don't even remember how you taste on my lips. Used to be something I needed. Now I see I had a reason. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habits that I had, 'cause look where it's got me. Searching for myself, didn't know I lost me. I ain't no saint. Let the devil have a way. I regret it every day. I was bummed out, stressed out, yeah. Think you made me feel the best I had. For a minute I thought I needed you. Now I'm seeing through all of the reasons that I made up in my head. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the
All right, everyone, and thank you for joining us back at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I'm always happy to be here with you. I am your host, Michael Voss, the Dragon of the Southern Tier, and I thank you for being here with us. I thank you because you make the difference. You are the reason why I talk about everything that we go over. And we have some really important issues to talk about now, and we're talking about at length about the issue that is affecting our nation right now, about child separation, about immigration, about our borders, because it's an important thing to talk about that isn't getting the proper justice due. Now, one of the things that's really important about this, and let's make sure we're covering this properly, as I mentioned in the first segment, so we understand there is a law that requires the treatment of all of the kids that has been going on and on. People are saying in the news, in the media, and Twitter, and misrepresenting the fact that there is a law that even President Obama had to deal with and address that affected 90,000 children in 2016 and currently had 11,000 unaccompanied children sent from foreign countries into the United States and left on their own from parents in other countries, as well as another 2,000, actually about 1,500, but 2,000 parents, children, whose parents were with them, and they were separated by law in facilities because that's what the law required. And that's what the Trump administration was doing to address that as per the law required. Now, that brings us up to what we started to see. Again, what was the backdrop? The Democratic Party, the media, were looking for some way to justify how evil and how wrong and how ineffective the Trump administration is. Whether you agree with Trump or not doesn't matter. Again, take the emotion out of this. There is no emotion in what I'm talking about. This is not about whether you like or dislike President Trump. It has nothing to do with that. What we need to address then is what happened next. Well, then we saw the news media started to put out, and this is back on May 29th, we saw that the news media came out and there was a photograph that was circulated, started talking about the fact that, hey, we're upset. There's this child, they're in cages, in steel cages. Oh my God, the Trump administration, how dare they do this? How dare they go out there and put kids in cages? And everyone lost their minds. We can't, as a nation, put children into steel cages. That is the worst thing that could possibly happen. Well, in fact, we didn't. That was something that happened in 2014, before the 2016 decision by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals on the Flores settlement, that, yes, President Obama did put children into steel cages. And this was represented as something that was being done by the Trump administration, which is not accurate at all. And it's not because I say that. That's because PolitiFact, on which they announced on May 29th, they reported on May 29th at 3 p.m., they reviewed this statement by President Trump that this was a 2014 picture and said it is completely true. There was a misrepresentation being made. There was an allusion by some in the media to take a tweet by John Favreau and to put it out there and say, oh no, this is what the Trump administration is doing. It is not. But the fuse had been lit. We see that the Democrats and the media found something that they could attack that would make the people, the public, you and me, enraged. It was an emotional issue, and there's no way to win an emotional issue once people have stopped thinking about it. That's how you are being used, is by your emotions, because that started it. And after that, we then got to see another picture which came out, which had a child, which was shown behind a cage. And that was not real. That image that came out, and suddenly we saw the little boy behind a black wire cage crying. And this again grabbed people's emotions and said, how could we possibly put children in a cage? Look at that young little 4-year-old child. How could we do that? And what didn't come out immediately was the fact that that 4-year-old child, that little child, the boy in the blue shirt, was not in a cage. That actually was set up. It was a staged event by the Democratic Party in Dallas to highlight and attack the immigration policies of the United States. It was a staged event. It was not true. It was not real. It was fake. There wasn't even a cage there. The child's parent was separated from her by 30 seconds. She was on the other side, right on the other side of the fence. But you didn't hear about that. That wasn't the big news. The big news was the headline was that picture, and that was the story. And media understands. People pay attention to the big story, the big headline. They don't pay attention. No one pays attention to the retraction or the correction. No one has paid attention to the fact that that was a staged event, and that child was right next to his parent. He was put in there because he was following his brothers and sisters into the event, into that little caged area, and then got confused on how to get out. It was a staged event. You're being misled, told that children are somehow in cages by these images that aren't real. Even further, we saw another picture, which has now gotten onto the cover of Time magazine, showing a little girl crying and being said that she's being separated from her parents. So powerful that Time magazine came out and put this out there. Except that, too, is a misrepresentation. It's a lie. It's not true. If you look at the picture carefully, and it has been proven by CBS News, that the child, her mother is in the picture with the child, standing right next to her. The mother is wearing the blue jeans. And she put down her child just so that she could be searched by the immigration officials at that moment. That's all she was doing. She put her child down, and the child didn't want to be put down. And it was at 11 o'clock at night, and they had been on the road all day. This is reported by CBS News. And so the child, who was tired and cranky, was put down and was upset. And the mother was searched and immediately picked up her child after that. The child was not separated from her mother ever. But the image is so powerful emotionally that it's being misrepresented and is being put out to the public. That's just incredible, isn't it? That's incredible that we're being used in such a way that the images are being manipulated to make us feel like something has happened, some horrendous action that has our nation, has pundits for the Democratic Party, for media, saying that America has become the Nazi party, Nazi Germany. That's insane. These children aren't being put into gas chambers. No one is dying. No one is being tortured. There is no evil being done here. Some children are being separated. And in fact, if we actually look at the proof that is out there, children have been separated for, on average, 57 days. They have been separated from the parents for 57 days or less, and they have been released either to foster care or other facilities or their parents. And they are being taken care of, including 700 in New York State alone. That is a fact. But we also got these images saying, oh my God, we can't be allowed into these detention centers. And that, which is for the protection of the children and minors. We can't have just pictures randomly of specific individuals and or disrupting of the facility. But more importantly, we're seeing these chain link fences. Oh my God, kids are in cages. Look at the chain link fence. Stop for a second. Again, this is all about emotion. And case after case after case, stop with the emotion and look at what you're actually seeing. We see a child who's next to its mother. We see a staged event by the Democratic Party. We see another image of a chain link fence. Guess what? There's a chain link fence around my elementary school, PS 78, 45 years ago. 45 years ago. I'm 50. 45 years ago, the school was surrounded by a chain link fence. There are basketball courts all over this nation surrounded by chain link fence. There are schools all around this country surrounded by chain link fence or other fencing. This is not new. A chain link fence that was put in place to be able to separate the children by gender and age groups so that they would be protected while they're in a temporary facility of central processing at McAllen, Texas, which is not their final spot. They go on to facilities that have food, not only food, refrigerators, video games, couches, beds, facilities that are better than what some people live with now. American citizens don't have some of the amenities that they have. Some of the children in families in America don't have these amenities. And we're being said that this chain link fencing that is absolutely commonplace across the nation is considered a cage. It's not a cage. This isn't a jail cell. This is absolutely normal. But the emotion that's put behind this, the emotion that's being put out there, well, that is the key. Because people are losing their minds. How could you do this to a child? No one should do this to a child. And I agree, no one should put a child in a cage. No one should do something like that. But we're not. That isn't what's happening. That is what's being reported, but that's not what's happening. And again, I have the evidence of this is out there. Most people just don't know and don't care because they haven't been told. And again, you can go over to factcheck.org for June of 2018 and their article on the Q&A on border detention of children. That's one of the articles. You can see the CBS article, which is out, which is on, the date is June 22nd, today. That was put out at 7:41 a.m., confirming that the child was never separated from her mother. You can look these up, and they will tell you have been manipulated. Your emotions have been used to advance an agenda, whether you knew it or not, assuming that you would never find out and never be able to care, because it will be after the fact, because the headline had already grabbed you, and the thought that someone was evil is well planted into your mind. That is an emotional manipulation. The public is being manipulated. And I find that the most insulting thing ever. It's worse than propaganda. This is being able to manipulate a political outcome by the use of emotions and denial of fact and misrepresenting facts, literally lying to the public. Look at this image. This is so horrible. Absolutely not true. Here's another image. Absolutely not true. Here's another image. Absolutely not true. And the moment that you stop looking at this emotionally, you say to yourself, well, why are we getting a fake image that has nothing to do with what we're talking about? Why are we getting misrepresentations of images that have nothing to do with what we're talking about? Why are we being shown commonplace things that are being misrepresented as something evil when it has nothing to do with the actual issue, which is how do we deal with unaccompanied minors and those accompanied with their parents, and more importantly, the influx of illegal aliens who have broken our law and come into our nation. How do we address that? But it gets even worse. But we're going to take another quick break, and then we'll come back and I'll address what's next. What else? What is the next thing? And I'll tell you about that in just a moment when we come back from this next break.
I say, lately I'm feeling like we ain't got no damn patience. Excuses why we cannot do this face to face, and then we cry and wonder why we ain't on the same damn page. If there's one thing I know, it's that this world keeps turning, and no one seems concerned. Whoa, that this world keeps turning. That's one thing I learned. 'Cause mama don't sleep at night since the sun done up and died. Ain't no brother's keeper, and no one looking out for the sisters either. And these families ain't no families. No one giving second chances. I don't understand why. It seems like this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. Yeah. Lately I'm feeling like wasting. No, I don't understand why we could have it all and throw it all away. Just cause everything we want don't go our way. Why? Just take a look outside, people losing lives. I'm just trying to see this world is much bigger than you and Lady, I'm feeling like we could make this all okay. No excuses, girl, we need to find a way and take our time and do this right before this all fades away. Cause if there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. If there's one thing I learned, it's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned. It's that this world keeps turning. No one seems concerned.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining me back at the ever-popular No Soundbites Allowed. And I am your host, Michael Voss, and I thank you. I thank each and every one of you for being here, and I thank you for listening to this episode and every episode that you listen to, because you are the reason why I do all of this. So we've been going through a lot about this issue of children at the border and separation and illegal immigration, and going through everything, because we need more than 30 seconds to discuss this. We need to not be driven by our emotions and manipulated as we have been. And I've made the case where we were 6 weeks ago, that a Democratic Party that is factually losing its power at almost the lowest level in 100 years, desperate to try and find a way to win the 2018 elections in the face of economics that are positive, in the face of a national security that was growing, with a news media that has failed to be able to properly convey this thought of doom that they've been saying for over a year now, for actually 18 months since before the election in 2016 election of President Trump, that we've been told this. And they've been looking for a way to try and emphasize this fear, this abject terror of what's going on. This is politically motivated. And then they suddenly found an emotional issue to take advantage of. And I've just gone through how people have been manipulated by images that are absolutely false. They are, each and every single one of them, a misrepresentation. They are not true. But yet, they have been pushing forward this agenda. And whether or not you like President Trump, I don't care. It's not important. It has nothing to do with it. We don't care about whether you like him or not. This isn't what the policy is about. This is about manipulating you to get a political agenda approved and to maintain power. And I want to express that. And again, we're going to have links for everything that I've just mentioned that is there, showing in black and white and in news reports that you probably didn't read, because most people haven't. Most people never do read the corrections. No one usually reads the retractions. That's just human nature in our nation. We don't see that. We see the headline that first starts it off. And let's see, what is it that has been the result? Because the drive was then to say, well, President Trump needs to take action. President Trump needs to come out and make a new law to change this. As they said, with this signature on a pen. That's it. Pen and paper, he can change this, an executive order, which is not the way law is done in our nation. Let's remember that. Executive orders are not law. President Obama learned that lesson very quickly. Executive orders are not law. Congress passes law. Immigration is a national issue that requires laws to change. But that doesn't change the message, especially when it's backed by such powerful emotion of images that are misrepresenting it. And we hear that fueling that, going along with that. In June 14th, we heard Nancy Pelosi, as she says, and I quote, "I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over this country. And maybe there will be when people realize that this is a policy that they defend. It's a horrible thing, and I don't see any prospect for legislation here." That's end quote. So that's Nancy Pelosi on June 14th, as reported by the Washington Times. Notice what she says there. She is inciting uprisings. She is asking for the nation to riot. She is asking for, and what happens in riots? Destruction of property, sometimes loss of lives, people being raped, fires. She's asking for some of the most horrible events that we see on the face of the earth to be enacted in our nation because of a political goal that she has to change laws on immigration. To change the law, she wants uprisings. She wants riots. And she says that she doesn't see legislation. So she's also saying that she is denouncing the opportunity to change those laws, even as she and Senator Schumer and the Democratic leadership are out there saying that there must be a change to the law. And the change to the law must be by an executive order, which does not have the weight of law. It is not effective. Does that make sense to you? That you would ask for riots to change a law that you're asking to be changed by someone who cannot change the law legally, and then you deny the opportunity or the effectiveness of being able to change that law. This is all over the place. This doesn't make any sense, except if you put it into the context of my emotions are very upset because a child is in a cage, which doesn't exist. When you put it in that context, that there's a child in a cage that doesn't exist, but you have that feeling, you have that emotion behind you and say, we can't do that, then it makes perfect sense to have riots. It makes perfect sense to say that you should change a law in a way that it cannot be changed, and to blame a political group that you are against, that you're trying to gain power against, and use that to get your power. That's what's being done here. This is the depth of the manipulation that's going on. And this is not a conspiracy theory. Again, I am citing credible news sources that are providing this information. It's just that it's not in 30 seconds. It takes longer. This is a big deal. We can't answer this in 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, you get to look at a photo that is a false and misrepresentation of what's going on. That's what you get in 30 seconds. You get lied to. But let's go on. And it wasn't just Nancy Pelosi on June 14th. We also had Senator Schumer. Senator Schumer decided to jump into this game back on June 19th. Because what happened was President Trump, in reacting to the nation, in reacting to the call and the outcry by the nation to say that there must be a change, that there must be something done. We must have action, even if that action is incorrect, because executive orders are not laws. So President Trump signed an executive order saying that we need to keep the parents together, even though it's only for 57 days of separation before the kids go back to their parents, even though there are no cages, even though the law from 1997 upheld by the Ninth Circuit Court in 2016 under President Obama said that we have to do that. President Trump said, no, we'll keep the families together. That doesn't change the fact that they broke the law. It doesn't change the fact that they have to still go through the process with immigration, and those seeking asylum still have to make the application for asylum. He's changed nothing. And in fact, nothing is different than what President Obama stated himself. And that's not just me saying that nothing changed from President Obama. The National Review said that there is no difference in the way this is going on, that this is actually President Obama's family detention policy and position. And they said so on June 21st of 2018, that this is exactly the same, that this is exactly what President Obama under the Flores decision has done, and that President Trump is only reinforcing that position with the stipulation that families, he's breaking the law here in saying that families will be kept together, unlike what Flores settlement said, and to allow those families to go through the immigration process and the asylum process together. Where's the horror there? Well, the horror was that that wasn't what Senator Schumer wanted. And Senator Schumer on June 19th rejected before the United States Congress had the opportunity to look at bills like H.R. 4760, the Goodlatte Amendment, or H.R. 6136. Before, and you can look up those bills, please do, to see what they are. They address the immigration issue. They address the separation of children, and they deal with unaccompanied minors. These bills actually address the question and say, okay, let's resolve the immigration issue. And before they even could get onto the floor of Congress to debate and discuss these bills, we already have Senator Schumer saying that all the Democrats are going to vote against this, that it will not be passed. Really? Really? And the answer from Senator Schumer is that, quote, legislation is not the way to go here when it's so easy for the president to sign it, end quote. Yes, the president can sign an executive order. It is not law. It does not resolve the immigration issue. That's why he sent it to Congress. That's why President Obama in 2016 requested Congress to come up with a solution to immigration. And that's what the Congress did on the 21st of June. You know, Charles Schumer on the 20th was saying, don't. We're not going to pass any bills. On the 21st, we actually got to discuss on the floor of Congress H.R. 4760, a bill. How can you tell us a day before the bill exists, before it's being presented, the arguments are being made? How can you say that you are going to reject it out of hand? Unless you have a political agenda in mind. And what is the goal? What is the agenda that they're looking to do? What is it that they're trying to gain? Well, quite honestly, what they're trying to gain, besides the 2018 election that they want to win, to pass their legislation to get higher taxes and to give a path to citizenship to illegal aliens, and to, more importantly, one of the goals here, why have they rejected this? Because their goal, just as it was in 2016 under the Flores settlement argument before the Ninth Supreme Court, is to release all of the illegal aliens, to allow the illegal aliens and their children and the unaccompanied children to be released into the United States, even though they are illegal aliens. That is the goal. That's what they've said. Now you got to say to yourself, well, Mike, that's when you're listening to the whole thing with the evidence going through the timeline, we get a very different picture. But, you know, no one wants to see that. No one on the left wants to see that, especially the far left, especially the news agencies. Because what Nancy Pelosi has requested when she asked there to be riots, well, people like Antifa and people like Occupy Wall Street, they heard her. They were listening. And these are some of the most radical of the far left individuals. And on June 19th, Occupy Wall Street came out with an image saying that we should kill immigration and customs enforcement agents, otherwise known as ICE. That's right. They came out with on Monday, they came out with an image that they say is what to do if you encounter an ICE agent. Now, Twitter has since taken down the picture and has been removed. And thank goodness it was, because it's vile. It's violence. It's asking for people to commit murder, which is exactly what Nancy Pelosi, this is the direct consequence of what Nancy Pelosi asked for. She asked for uprisings. She asked for riots. And she wanted people hurt and harmed because of her political view, a view that she is not willing to discuss, a view that says that we must break the law and release in illegal aliens in our nation because she wants that, because her party is in the weakest place it has been in almost 100 years. For her political gain, for her party's political gain, she asked for people to be injured. And that's exactly what we see has come about by Occupy Wall Street. They complied. They put out a message to say we should kill ICE agents. That's really, really terrifying. And that was followed up by Antifa, yet again, the farthest of the left, some of the most dangerous people out there, who have been constantly seen only doing one thing, attacking people for having an idea they don't like, just like Nancy Pelosi, just like Senator Schumer. They went out there, and on June 20th, Antifa released the names and photos of 1,600 ICE agents, including pictures of their IT personnel with his son on Father's Day, and asking for these individuals to be affected, to have go out there so that they can comply with the Occupy Wall Street image of murdering individuals. Murder. And when people say to me, well, Mike, what has our nation become? Are we a nation that puts kids in cages? No, we're not. I have to ask you, are we a nation that advocates for murder for political gain? Are we that nation? Is that what the Democratic Party is about? That we would kill individuals who have a different viewpoint, that they have a different idea. Just because they have a different idea, Nancy Pelosi is advocating violence. That's what an uprising is. And they're not willing to hear or allow the rule of law to take place to be able to change those laws. When the ruling for the vote for H.R. 4760 went through yesterday, June 21st, 100% of the Democrats voted against it. Didn't even consider it. They spent the entire time on the floor arguing against the bill, telling us how evil the bill was, that we have children in cages. That's the only argument they made. That the children were in cages. How dare we have children in cages? We should release them. We should release their parents. We should let the illegal aliens go into our nation without further delay, which is against the law. They ignored the 1997 law, the Flores settlement. They ignored the 2016 challenge by the Ninth Circuit Court. They ignored the fact that the law says that these are things that must be done. No. That's not important. The fact that they had not a single complaint about this in 2016, that they did not have a news story or complaint or an issue about this in 2017, and even in 2018, until they lost every other issue, until North Korea has started its process of peace talks, until the economy went to 3.8% unemployment and the self-employed number hit 9 million new businesses, and the economy is looking up, looking towards 4% growth. Only until they had lost all of the issues they promised everyone would never possibly happen, and their party, the Democratic Party, is looking at its lowest point in 100 years, only then did they turn around and say, hey, immigration's a really big deal. And you know what? Anyone who opposes us is evil. They're Nazis. I have to ask you a question. In 2009, the Democratic Party had a supermajority. They controlled Congress, the House, and the presidency with enough numbers of members that they could pass any law they wanted. It could not be stopped by Republicans. They could pass anything they wanted. If they wanted immigration reform, as they had promised people for decades that they would provide, given the opportunity, that moment in time, the entire year of 2009 going into 2010, they could pass anything. And what they passed was the Obama stimulus, which did not work by any and all objective reasoning, including the statements by the Obama administration when they passed it. Every objective, it failed. They also passed cash for clunkers, which hurt the auto industry and actually cost the nation $4 trillion. And they passed Obamacare with backdoor deals and bribes to other Democrats, which has failed. Half of the Obamacare facilities in each of the states half of them are already closed because they failed. The cost of health insurance has gone up at a dramatic double-digit rate across the country in every state, including New York State, year by year, with unaffordable premiums and unaffordable deductibles that have to be paid. So they failed. They failed in every object, every step. But they could have passed immigration reform, could have passed anything about it. If they wanted a path to citizenship, they could have passed it in 2009 going into 2010. They didn't. It wasn't important. Because the votes of Hispanics were not that important. The votes of blacks were not that important. Obamacare was far more important to them. That's just a political reality. That is just the reality. The assumption is they had the votes of the Hispanics. They had the votes of, already had the votes of blacks. So they didn't need to go and do anything. They had already won. They already won. And they had a supermajority and could do anything they wanted. And that's all they did. All of them failures. And now, looking at the result, because they failed the nation, because none of their policies worked, because the nation was in a worse place at the end of 2016 than it had been prior. They lost the election with a criminal Hillary Clinton. That's my opinion. My opinion. When they lost the election, Donald Trump got elected, and they're at the lowest point that they've been in 100 years. Almost the lowest point in 100 years. They decided that they need something else. And so they've asked for riots. They've asked for people to be murdered. They've denied the ability to make any changes to the laws because they're looking to win an election. Now, I've gone over this in depth for for almost an hour now. And I'm giving you facts. You may not like the conclusion of those facts that I've come to. You may not want to agree with it. But there are certain very clear facts. The facts are, again, that we have been manipulated emotionally, that we have been shown pictures that are out of context and are absolute lies, that do not apply to this situation and are there only to manipulate our emotional feelings to allow a political party to gain power and to manipulate us. And we have watched as elected officials have gone out and used that emotional manipulation to incite riots and to deny the ability of the government to fix the problem. Using children to be able to take advantage for the pure and simple gain of political power. Something that everyone in this nation, if they were aware of it, would be angry. No one would in their right mind say that as a fair trade-off to use children to advance a political agenda. And everyone would argue that. But instead, because of the emotion, we see the tweets, we see the Facebook, and we have this opinion being promoted out there that if you have any question about this, doesn't matter if the facts are there, you must be evil, you must be a Nazi to say that this is wrong. Well, I stand here before you, and if you want to call me a Nazi, if you want to call me a racist, go right ahead. But I have to tell you, the American people are being manipulated for political gain of a partisan group. And that is worse. Because America is not Nazi Germany. The children are not being put into gas chambers. No one is being separated for life. And while we can change those laws, and we can make it better, and we can put in immigration reform, what is happening right now is devastating to our nation. The people are being used, and I cannot stand that. I do not approve of that, and I find that absolutely abhorrent. But these are the facts, and the facts stand for themselves. Separate the emotion, especially since that emotion is being put there for false reasons, out of false pretenses. Abandon those emotions, look at this, and see it for what it is. End the manipulation. Let's actually take back our nation in a way. Take it away from this evil that's, well, I don't want to call it evil. Let's say this manipulation, this very, very dangerous path that we are on. It is not helping us. But I look forward to hearing your comments on this. You tell me what you think about it. Tell me what you think of the facts. We will have links on all of the sources of everything that I've just gone over. Please look it up, find out the information for yourself, and then make whatever decision you wish. And hopefully, we take our nation from the abyss into a better place with better laws and better actions than where we are going right now. But again, I thank you, each and every one of you, for being here at the No Soundbites Allowed podcast. I look forward to everyone who's going to be on the podcast. We have the Q&A, a public Facebook simulcast that we do every Saturday from 12 until 1:30, which will be addressing any questions that you may have. You can see me on Facebook. My name is Michael Voss, and I look forward to being able to see you there and answer your questions. And I look forward to talking to everybody again very, very soon. Please send me your comments. You can reach me at Twitter at mvconsult, and you can send an email to info@vossconsult.com. We look forward, or you can comment on this podcast, and we look forward to talking to you all again very, very soon. And you have a great day.